F1 is the pinnacle of motorsport. It has some of the fastest, most expensive cars in the world. But why is it that expensive? And is there anything being done to bring costs back down? To answer this question, I think it's important to have a cost comparison between F1 cars and the cars that you and I drive in the real world. Follow me. To best make this comparison, I thought it'd be easiest to show rather than to tell. So I took a bus up to the Greenwood lot where my sister's car was parked. I'm definitely glad I didn't have to walk this far. It took me a second to find the car, but I got there on time. Now, if you wanted to buy one of these cars used, that cost about $5,000. But if you wanted to buy an F1 car, it'd set you back around $15 million. So, let's break it down. Let's say you wanted to put an F1 engine into your car. How much would it be? The engines in an F1 car cost upwards of $10.5 million. Meanwhile, the engine in my car here costs around $700 to $1,000, depending on where you look. Now, the front bumper on this car is about $60 if I want a new one, but on an F1 car, the front and rear wings are going to be $150,000 each. Now, arguably, one of the most important parts of the car is the steering wheel. A new one for a CR-V is about $87, and all it has on it is the horn and the cruise control buttons. But in an F1 car, that steering wheel costs about $50,000 to $100,000, and it's got more buttons and dials and even a little screen. So, why is it so expensive? That's where my interviewee came in handy. I interviewed Chainbear F1. I'll let him do the intro.
I'm Stuart Taylor. I run a Formula One explainy animated shorts channel on YouTube under the name Chainbear.
In the interview I conducted, I asked 5 questions about new regulations, budget caps, various ways to balance the sport, growing costs, and about more computerization coming to the sport. With the new regulation changes coming, like the budget caps and like limiting testing, do you think that's going to have like as large of an effect as like the FIA are hoping, or like what do you think on that?
I think the FIA have done a smart thing in that they haven't actually publicly given any measurable benchmarks about that. I'm sure they probably have some internal ones that they're kind of hoping for, but we don't actually know how effective they expect this to be, which I think kind of makes sense because they haven't really done this before, especially around cost capping. It's a really hard thing to judge. I think it's not something we're going to sort of see immediately kind of play out in the sport, or like we're suddenly going to see like the small teams that were spunky but never had any cash are suddenly going to shoot up to the top. But I think this is going to sort of cascade through the years and start bringing everyone close together. At least I hope it is, and I kind of expect that's what F1 and the FIA are sort of hoping will happen.
In the next question, I asked about budget caps and why it perhaps took so long for one to be implemented.
A lot of it comes down to the teams. They tried to put one in 2009, 2010. I mean, the FIA were already there. I think they tried to bring in a $40 million budget cap 2009, 2010, and they had it all down. They were like, this is what the rules are going to be, which is significantly smaller than the 145 I think they're bringing in for next year. What was it called? Like the resource restriction agreement or something like that, which is still a thing that plays out now. That's the thing that started the whole, we're getting rid of testing in mid-season. You can only test a small amount of time each year. You can only use so many components each year. That you can only bring so many staff. You have to have a curfew on race weekends. It's that kind of thing that started exactly that kind of thing that we see today, that they've kind of tightened up in some areas, that just chilled everyone out a little bit, just made everything a bit smaller.
The next question focused on the costs of the sport and why said costs are so high.
I had a little think about this one because it is an interesting. I mean, part of it again, I think, kind of like the cost cap thing. It isn't just a recent years thing. I think recent years, it's like you look at it now and you're like, whoa, that's out of control. But the last couple of decades, I think this has sort of been a problem that's just been brewing and brewing and brewing. It's an arms race. It's new technology, and it's this kind of just this fighting over like tiny fractions of development. So whereas like, I don't know, up until like the late 70s, early 80s kind of time, it would your car development, your ingenuity would be like a team of experienced engineering people who would come up with great ideas and throw them on the car and see if they worked. And you could do all kinds of things. You could just put a massive wing on the car. You could put a fan on the back. You could put 6 wheels on it. One team ran like 2 chassis stacked on top of each other. I think that was to get around a rule, to be honest. But but it was very wacky races kind of thing. And now, because of the way the technical regulations are, everybody is free to develop as they wish. There's you can come up. It's not a spec series at all, but the box in which they're allowed to develop their cars is very, very small. So kind of what you've got now is just lots and lots and lots of people and computers and wind tunnel time and CFD time going into just testing and honing all these tiny improvements to just eke you out a little further. It's just essentially just plowing resources into developing something. Development doesn't come from a small amount of people who are just really good at what they do. It's just we'll just throw more money at the problem.
I just want to give a thanks to Shane Bear F1 for letting me interview him. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description below, as well as a link to the full interview. Thanks for watching.